Welcome everyone, how's it going? Welcome to Mind, Stress and Ryu's Wild Rift WREC tier list. I was going to say Wild Rift, something else there. This is a player tier list. You can see all the players, all the teams here that have all qualified for the WREC, which is happening in... Oh my god, it's 1 week today, isn't it? Wow. Maybe not on YouTube, but like on Twitch when we're actually recording this. 1 week today. So how this is going to work, you got all of our tier lists, mine, Ryu's and Stresses. We're going to go through every single role from Baron Lane to support, and then we'll end up with the teams. Hopefully, fingers crossed this won't be too long, but it might be pretty long because I'm sure we've all got a lot of things to talk about. But anyway, enough of the chit chat. Let's head in straight to the Baron Lane. We're all kind of the same, I guess. Whereas Ryu's like said, just like put UI and Cold Star in C tier.
This big scale. You and I are kind of like, well, you know, people are kind of.
I just realized. Oh no.
I have very sparingly used the C tier on mine. I'm gonna put it that way.
Okay.
Don't worry. I think I'm kind of the same, to be fair.
I've used it quite well. You know, in my opinion, there is a clear cut between the good and the rest. I'll just say that like that way. I think there is such a large skill gap between Acolyte and the rest. So I felt like I had the need to use the C tier.
That's fair. I appreciate that as well. Also, like you've played against them, I haven't, so I will totally not like add extra flame there because I think that's actually a really important piece of context there. It's like when you've played against these players, you have a much like more of a foundation,
better understanding.
I also have the opinion that I actually were really considering between UI, Sneaky, and Cyrex, who was above each other. I think if I could change it right now, I'd put Cyrex one tap down. So he's like on the same standing with Sneaky and UI. I think I've seen UI is playing against top laners from Europe, so it's obviously completely different for him. He's playing against, you know, random Acolyte and Lonely Kid, so it's obviously harder to look good, whereas Sneaky and Cyrex is playing against a whole different caliber of top laners. And I think personally from watching UI against the top tier top laners in EU, I've just seen, I don't know, the picks, he's picking him, he's counter picking himself, he's using jungle utility terribly. I don't know. From my point of view, I don't think he's being used. I don't know. I've not seen anything very good from him, and that's why I'm putting Sneaky and Cyrex above him, because I feel like they have been a vital part of their success in the Turkish region. But we might, you know, see that the Turkish region is so much weaker that maybe UI was indeed better, but it's hard to tell before we get there. And I think I'm rating the Turkish teams a little bit higher than most people are. So yeah, that's my reasoning for putting UI under. I think he has been having the toughest matchups, but I don't think I've seen enough to put him higher than the other guys right now.
I think that's also kind of part of what we were talking about like needing to play as a team. I think formulation of how to play style is a little bit different to everybody for the majority of the split. Like they play a lot of Aurelia mid, which I know obviously is one of Don's picks, but I think it really took focus away from top lane, where some other teams had a bit more of a carry in top, if that makes sense. So I think it is totally fair to like look at that and be like, well, as an individual, it's not being as like a necessary part of the team for formulation as well.
I don't think he gets like the resources that probably other Baron laners get as well.
Right.
Like if you think of like Random, for example, like SE7 goes up there quite a bit. Zefter as well with Lonely Kid as well. I mean, when we saw like Game Lord against WREC, it was like all in the Baron lane, but like formulation, I feel like is not too much focused on the Baron lane. It's more focused on either defending Don in the mid lane when he's getting 3-man ganked in the mid lane constantly throughout the whole game, or down in the duo lane as well. But I think we're all kind of on the same page, where it's like, you know, you kind of got this gap where you got Lonely Kid, Random, and Acolyte, which we'll talk about Lonely Kid and Random in a second, and then there's kind of a gap between the rest, which I think is kind of similar to the teams as well. But I mean, me personally, like I've played with Cyrex before. I know his potential. I know he's really good Baron laner. Sneaky as well. I've seen quite a lot on NASA. UI, not really too sure, and then Cold Star as well. Obviously, we saw a little bit from him last year, the Origin series and the Horizon Cup, and then obviously the match that they played against talented ones as well. But one thing I want to pick off actually is kind of, I think, the battle at the top of the Baron lane, which is Lonely Kid against Random. Now, me and Ryuh have both put Lonely Kid, but you put Random slightly above Lonely Kid. Stress.
Yeah,
Slightly
I think it's
above.
just from I have a little bit of recency bias, a little bit of seeing Ricks in last chance qualifier, and like as much of this is like what we saw in the split, I'm also trying to like think of, okay, we haven't seen them for a little while. How has their scrims been? Like, whereas Ricks looked really confident and Random looked really, really strong. I think what I would say about this is it's so close between them that even though they're right there next to each other, but they're actually both a tier down from where everybody expected them to be, or at least Random coming into the split. Like coming into the split, everyone was like, Random is undoubtedly the top Baron laner, and he will smash everyone, and no one's gonna stand a chance.
Yeah.
And Lonely Kid looked good, like had multiple matchups go his way. I would say even like Acolyte and a couple of the other Baron laners like didn't cause Random too many problems, but it wasn't that standout performance where it was just like he's just going to smash everybody and nobody has any chance. So that was the interesting thing about top Baron lane for me.
And it's not only that. I think when I came into watching Random join Riggs, I was like, okay, now we're gonna see Riggs probably bringing in the strongest roster we've ever seen in Europe, and Game Lord obviously surprised with their pickups, with being Heste and Lonely Kid even performing, maybe better than their previous counterparts. So I think when I watched Random in the beginning of the season with Riggs, I was so underwhelmed. This guy looks like a tier top laner when he just joined Riggs. I don't know. He went from being one of the best, if not the best, European player we have, to an average top laner losing random matchups. He would not take over games like he used to with leads, and he was like a completely different player. And I think over time during the WREC qualifier, and especially the last chance qualifier, I think he showed us that he is who he is, and that he's a lot better than he used to be, and he's getting back into his level. It's a good time for him to get back in there. But I actually felt the need to put Lonely Kid in the G tier above Random. So in the beginning, I wanted to put a space between them, simply due to the fact that Lonely Kid was probably the main carry alongside Sefter on Game Lord. And he's the reason for the biggest success. I think Lonely Kid, when giving the resources, he was completely taking over games. He was dumpstering everyone. And even Random was not able to, like, Acolyte, in my eyes, is the perfect weak side top laner. He just picks whatever he needs for the team. He's going to do fine. He's not going to lose the game, and he's going to be vital in the late game team fight. He's going to be there for the team in the right times, and he's just solid. The definition of solid, that's Acolyte to me. And that's why he deserves to be in the S tier. But Random and Lonely Kid are probably one of the stronger main carries of their teams, and I just think Lonely Kid just showed straight up better that he was, the better carry in the WRC playoffs. But yeah, I mean, we obviously saw Random coming a big back in the last chance qualifier. But yeah, for me, Lonely Kid deserves to be in the G tier as the main carrier of the team that qualified as the first seed. So yeah, that's my reasoning.
I think that's totally fair reasoning. And actually, like, as you were talking and a little bit of reading chat as well, I kind of got reminded a little bit of why I felt from the last chance I wanted to put Random over Lonely Kid, because you're totally right. Like, Lonely Kid, if I remember in the finals, I think actually won matchup at every game, if I remember rightly.
Crazy.
Like, when
I'm pretty sure Lonely Kid even
impressive.
solo killed Random a few times
And
as well, if I'm not mistaken.
I remember thinking, like, damn, Lonely Kid is like taking over. What I would say though is that, like, the changes with Hullbreaker, we saw Random play Graves, we saw the split pushing, like we saw Random kind of go, okay, I can actually take control of a game again. But of course, like, Game Lord went in last chance qualifiers, so it's hard to judge. Yeah, I think that's something that I would love to, like, I need to catch up a little bit on the meta before finals, but I want to see how that kind of changes things top lane. But I totally agree. Like, Lonely Kid from the regular split, like the actual playoffs, was insanely good.
But nothing to take away from Acolyte and Random. I think it's so clear. Yeah. These three guys are the best players we have in top lane in Europe, and they are all fantastic. So yeah, cool. I think that's my take on top lane.
Cool. I think that's pretty much everything. I mean, it's interesting because we haven't seen Game Lord for so long as well, so we actually have no idea what they've been prepping, behind the scenes and everything as well. And we kind of seen like the rest of the teams a little bit because they were all in last chance, but like Game Lord, I feel like is the only team now that we haven't really seen too much of, and Unicorns Love, because we only saw one series from them. I think we're all pretty similar, to be fair, with the Baron lane. Not a bad start, to be fair. It's definitely.
And I will say, I am not surprised if we're gonna put Random back in the top of G tier after the event.
Right.
It would not surprise me if that's how we're gonna see it after the event.
That's the thing. I feel like from the actual regular season, the WREC, I feel like the meta didn't really suit him. But now, as like Stress said, with like Hullbreaker, items like that, you can actually go more into the Baron lane and more into split pushing now, which I think is where kind of Random really shines. If he can get them 1v1 situations, if he can get rolling, if he can get on champions that he's comfortable with, that he can carry with Divine Sunder and items like that as well, I think he's definitely in a stronger spot. But again, we haven't seen Lonely Kid with the new items or anything like that, or anything at all. So yeah, it'll be interesting. I think that'll be hopefully we get that in the hopefully get that match somewhat somewhere in the WREC final.
I'd be surprised if we don't. That would be a tragedy.
That would cast a curse at its finest.
That's actually one thing I want to touch on that you guys probably haven't seen too much, but I think actually Sneaky, right? I think Sneaky has the potential to compete with the top tier top laners. And hear me out, the problem is that he only plays one champion well, and he plays Akali, and he plays it well. He's a good Akali player, And if he can get that pick, I'm sure that he can compete with the other guys. But the reasoning I have to put him so low is that this is a competitive game. You need to be able to play multiple champions at the highest level. And that's why I cannot put him higher. But like pure mechanically speaking, and if he picked up more champions in the last few weeks, he's not a bad player.
Right.
Everyone here he's here for a reason. He's at the top 16.
I think
exactly,
that's the thing for everyone. Like everyone's here for a reason,
Exactly.
Even though we put players in like B tier or C tier, that's like kind of only our opinions. And I think like you said, all of these teams are qualified for for a reason.
Exactly. All of them are good. And they put them in the C tier for a reason, because I feel like there is such a huge gap between the top three and the rest. And it is not about them being bad. It's about the fact that I think the gap is so large that we need to use all the tiers.
No, that's fair.
But I just wanted to put in that 2 cents that some of these players are actually not bad. Like for example, Sarex has a good Fiora. UI is fantastic on Renekton. Sneak is great at Akali. But that is just not enough to go higher on the standings. In my tier list, you need to play multiple champions at the highest level, and that's why they're low.
Of course.
Yeah.
Cool. Especially in a role like Baron lane, when there's like 8 champions you can play easy that could see bans. So
exactly.
If you're playing one that isn't even part of the 8, you're like, well, that's gonna get banned.
Yes, and that is also why
with like
changes
as well.
Others. Yeah.
I mean that even the champion changes as well to Baron lane might switch things up as well, which is going to be quite interesting. Yeah, that's Baron lane. We can I think we can move on to the jungle next, which is somewhat similar. Again, there's a few ifs and buts here and there, a few differences there, but I feel like most of us has gone for Andreas and Zefter at the top, where Stress has kind of put Zefter a little bit further down. I think there's like a lot of very similar kind of G tier and S tier, but just swap all around sort of thing. Like for me, jungle, there's kind of like the top 2 for me, which is Andreas and Zefter, and then SC7 is a bit below that. I definitely feel like he's improved a lot since like the start of the year and since when he first joined Rix, which as you mentioned briefly, Ryuh, even like Random as well, when he first joined Rix. Like Rix at the start of this new roster was kind of meh, but I feel like they're slowly getting stronger and stronger, and they're when they're playing together and everything as well. And then you have kind of this gap as well. But go on, I'll let you two I'll let you two come in. Whoever wants to talk first about
I'll let Ryuh
jungle.
go first. I went first on the Baron laners. So I'll let Ryuh go.
Let's start on the bottom side, okay? I think as you can see already, I put no one in C tier this time. I think the gap between the junglers is a lot lower. I think simply, I don't know. I know that jungle is probably the most skill expression role in the game. Whereas if you are bad, you're gonna solo lose the game, But I feel like when it comes to competitive, it's extremely difficult to see which junglers are doing something on their own, or are they following a team call or something. And I think the jungle support duo, how they work together is a lot about how the jungle role works in general. So I think it's hard to just pick one guy out and say, yo, this guy sucked in this game a bit, but maybe it's so many pieces around the junglers just has to be great for them to look good. And that's why I have them closer to each other, and like there's only so few jungle paths you can actually take in the early game, and then the rest of the game is just I would say a shit show, but it's not really. It's like it's a team game, It's a team game. It's a team oriented role. So I have left space between the players simply because of that reason, and I think none of them played bad in particular. I think a lot of them had good and bad games, but I think no one showed that they were outmatched, and That's why I have them closer. Yeah.
And I feel like the fact that it's a team role, like already we've seen it impact the way we think about jungle. For me, a player that is really evident for, that I don't think I've seen enough individually out of, but I still think is a good player, is Kimiao, where he's like shackled to mid lane. If he's not counter ganking mid lane, like the enemy are always just in mid trying to pick off Don, because of like so many Aurelia games where you can't get out of. And I feel like we've seen some flashes from Kimao that like feel like, okay, yeah, formulation can compete, but I feel like that's a player that's really kind of hindered in the way that the team together has to play around, which is just the difference between teams, right? And at the same time, to talk a little bit about Andre and why I put him in G tier, I think I only put 2 players total in G tier, because for me, you have to be like above and beyond, and that only for Andre is possible because of all of Queso give him everything, right? It's like if they didn't have that playstyle, I probably wouldn't put Andre at G tier. He'd probably be an S tier depending on the results. But like they literally give him everything. They invade for him, they ward for him, they give him gold, like every single thing that they can give to him as a player. So of course he has to carry, but of course he looks like a superstar because of it. And that's why for me it's really hard to overlook, because I think if we saw Zefto or SC7 play the same playstyle, maybe they would be in exactly the same spot as Andre. But from what we've seen, I'm like, no, he's got to be the top jungler, just purely because he's like the only guy that truly jungle carries in Europe as a region, from it the way I see it anyway.
I think is another thing as well, is like what you mentioned briefly, Ryuh, as well, is like the whole jungle support synergy as well, which I think, you know, Zefta has a really good jungle support synergy. I think we'll see with like, you know, Heste in the support role, which I think we all think is probably the best support at the moment, which is kind of allowing Zefta to be stronger. But I mean, for me, it's hard to put anyone kind of on the same level as them two, because for me, like SE7, again, you know, even though he has improved a lot and we have seen a lot from him, you know, especially from the last chance qualifier, it's still hard for me to say like, oh, okay, this guy's on the same level as Zefta and Andreas, because as you said, you know, Andreas gets all the resources, he's really mechanically good. Same with Zefta as well, especially that support synergy as well with Heste. They work really, really well together, even with Andreas as well, with Methanol as well, even though that's kind of a new jungle support duo. I feel like they're doing pretty well, and especially with, you know, Yuumi buffs as well. That'd be quite interesting. It'll probably be perma-banned from them every single game. I'll be very surprised if they play Yuumi at all next week. I think that's my reason behind like putting them two above the rest, is that them two are just, you know, above and beyond for me. And then SE7 is like, you know, he's still good. And then like for me, as you can see, there's quite a big gap. I mean, I don't know too much about like Bambi, Faton, Swest. I've watched a little bit from Kimao as well. Obviously, I feel like he's decent, but he's not on the same level as the three above. But I'm excited to see the other junglers as well, like Faton and Bambi, because you've put Faton above Swest and Kimao, Ryuh.
And that's actually one of the things I wanted to touch on. I think I'm also the only one who put 7 below S tier.
Yeah.
And I think if I have to go, I'm just gonna go from one. So I think Bambi was the second best jungler in the Turkish region. There were no other good junglers. This guy smashed the bad ones, and he lost to Swest. So it's hard to say that he's you know, below, much more below the other guys. So I just put him in B tier. It's like he's an average player. He does his job. He wins when he has to, and he loses to someone who's better. Fair enough, you know, that happens. So I just put him in B tier. Whereas Kimao, I feel like Kimao is playing against the better player since he's playing in the European region. But I think he's been super confused sometimes, and I'm giving him the benefit of the doubt. You'll be playing against better players. Bambi is not. That's why I'm just putting you above. But I actually think Kimao has a chance to get exposed of doing just random things where he should. He's on the map sometimes when I'm like, why are you here? This is you. The fact you are here is like, I don't know, like every single other best teams, they're like playing through top lane, playing through something, and I just feel like Kimao is just, oh, that jungler is here. I should probably go here as well. So I don't know. When it comes to Swest, I think this guy is my player to watch in this entire tournament. I think Swest has shown that he's the best Turkish jungler by a mile, and I hope that he is able to show the same thing in WREC, because I think he's insane, and I want to put him in my first tier list. I put him in the bottom of S tier. I put him above 7, in the bottom of F tier, and I think he can go there, but he hasn't shown that yet. That's why I feel like it's hard for me to put him there. But from personally knowing him, playing with him, against him, I think this guy is the vocal point and the best player in the Turkish region by far. Lonely Kid is better. Sorry, he's playing in the European region. He's Turkish. But after Lonely Kid, I think Stress is crazy good. But it's hard to look really good on a team that's not as good as you are. So he's my player to watch. And the reason I have Fatan above him is that he is the sole reason that Unicorns Above is winning and winning games hard as they do. I think Fatan has an amazing jungle support synergy with Grizzly Q. And those guys are genuinely good jungle support duo. So I'm excited to see how, you know, Svest and that's his support, Fatan and Grizzly Q. I'm putting this as a way I'm saying I'm excited to see them go up against the best ones. I give them the benefit of the doubt. They're good, they can compete, and that's why they deserve A tier. I hope they can go beyond, but I need to see it before I can put them above 7.
I think that's going to be an interesting match, actually. You know, formulation against Unicorns Alive. I mean, we only saw Unicorns
Very
Alive
much.
like a little bit, but like for a first game of the WREC with so much on the line, like if you lose that game, that's it. You're done. Like you come all the way to Barcelona and everything, and there's, you know, your first match that you play. I mean, normally you have the big, massive stake games where you get knocked out maybe like a bit later in the tournament, but it starts off with probably the biggest one of the biggest games in the entire tournament to see who actually goes to the group B. But I feel like whoever wins out of like Formulation and Unicorns of Love in that what's the word called, playoff game, in the playoff game, they actually have a really good chance, I feel like, to get out of Group B, because they're in a Group B with Parla, which we don't really think is as strong as the other teams, and what's the other one? And Game Lord, which obviously we know Game Lord are above and beyond the rest, but it's like the top 2 teams from each group, so they actually have a good chance.
I was going to say, that's the thing then, right? It's like you only need to be better than one team.
Yeah.
Like if you want to get out, all you got to do is be better than the one team in your group.
And if I were to be honest, I think the first game we got to be watching Clown Fiesta in the top lane. You are against Coldstar, the C tier battle, and they both have great.
Oh yeah, true. Actually, you put both in C tier.
Yep.
The Clown's Fiesta top
no, but
lane.
The thing, I genuinely think Fatan and Swest are great junglers, but they just don't have the pieces to carry. Like, a jungler is a role in this meta right now that need to enhance, and they need to help their main carry get to that point. You know, Androset is different; they play a different style. But Sefta is helping Lonely Kid pop off. Androset is, you know, his team is helping him pop off. And Seven is not playing this style. That's why I put him in lower. And I think Fatan and Swest is doing the Androset thing just for the other regions, and we need to see this again. But I don't know. Hard to pop off with mediocre laners, and I don't know. I think I'm so excited to watch the WRC because of the jungle matchups. I think there are so many good players here. Just how are they gonna stack up?
Yeah, that's a super fair question, and I think like last thing like about SC7 like is I think it's a really important event to kind of prove that. I think he fits within WREC already, right? I don't think there's any problems with that regard, but I think it's a really important thing to see whether he's going to get out jungled by the likes of Zefta or Andre, because there's 7. I've just seen a few moments where they stick out where it's just like every so often he's in the wrong place at the wrong time. Yeah. Like this, like an objective's going down and they take it and he goes in and invades a red buff or something like that. Like there's just a handful of moments like that that really unpin SC7. Like I feel like it was game 2 of the finals. He went like 0-6 because he had a terrible jungle matchup. There were 8 jungle bans on the Kazakhs. And like, I know there's not a lot you can do. We're talking about jungle as a support lane, but like, I think those are the games that if SC7 goes the entire time in Barcelona without those games, I'll feel a lot more confident about putting him even higher, if that makes sense, which I think kind of ties into what we're talking about.
It's funny, you know, because I actually want to put both Fatan and Swest above 7. But
I know, that makes me excited, though.
But since he's on WREC and he's shown top 2 performances, like his team is constantly winning, you have to do something right, you know? And I don't know. It's hard for me. I think he's just, how do I say it? I think he's insane. I think he's at the wrong place at the right time so often. I feel like he's invading without lane priority. I feel like he's invading again without vision. I feel like sometimes he's just flipping the game, just literally just flipping the game, whereas his team is playing so stable. I don't know, like Doom is just farming up, playing perfectly in the bottom side, not making any mistakes. Snitch is Snitch, you know, never doing a wrong step. And Random is the one who's trying to push the game into their favor, and 7 is just suddenly on the red buff with no vision, invading. Like, why are you here? Random has a perfect way in top lane. Why? Like, I don't know. Like, this guy is good because he's on Rix. He's a good player. But what? And that's why I hope he's gonna get exposed, but probably not. He's probably not gonna be exposed because he has two good laners. So I think Seven is getting carried by good laners, but maybe I'm wrong.
Yeah, I think the way you said, like, in terms of flipping, I think he definitely gets caught out quite a lot. I mean, we saw that quite a lot, that he just gets caught out by himself sometimes. And he's just at, like you said, you know, the wrong place at the wrong time as well. And I feel like that might be something to do with maybe his like solo queue mentality as well, because if I remember, like, they picked up SE7 from solo queue. So again, maybe he's still trying to get used to like this competitive, you know, environment and things like that as well.
I think
like I said at the start, like I said. Oh yeah, I think he played. Yeah, I think he played like a little bit of competitive, but I think there's a big difference between like an unorg team and then you're jumping all the way up to Rix, which I think is kind of the same with like other players as well, which we'll talk about from other lanes as well. I think trying to have that big massive step up where you're going from, you know, an unorg team with just like a bunch of, I wouldn't say random players, but a bunch of like friends playing against each other. And then you're jumping up to one of the best teams in Europe as well. So you've got like really, really big shoes to fill as well, especially how good Doom was as well in jungle as well for Rix last year. It is quite difficult for him. And sometimes like I said, sometimes it feels like he does have big shoes to fill. And sometimes it's like, you kind of, or not really feel sorry for him, but I don't know if you get what I mean. But like sometimes you feel like, damn, it's actually really hard to play with these sort of players and play against these players as well. But I think, you know, you put in like Phaeton and Swest as well. Obviously, like the players from like NASA, Parlor, and Unicorns Love, I feel like have not been tested enough, and this is going to be their biggest test in this tournament. So I feel like them teams in general have a lot to prove, which is going to be quite interesting.
Right.
But I genuinely think Seven is doing what Anderson does. Anderson just has his team helping him, and Seven is just, I don't know, YOLOing. And I feel like Seven,
he's doing it without the resources. This is what happens when Andre doesn't get everything from the team.
Exactly. And that's actually how I see it. I think he's a great player. Yeah. But
I think that's a good actually thing to bring up about. I'll move on to mid lane in a second, but I think that's a good thing about Rix and a good thing to point out about Rix in general is that they have so many star players. Who do you put the resources into? You know, you got Random in the Baron lane, who's one of the best Baron laners. You have Doom in the duo lane as well, which we've seen he can pop off with pentakills. Snitch as well in the mid lane. I'm sure he wants resource. I'm sure all these players want like resources. I feel like Random's kind of had like the bad side of it, where sometimes he's, you know, been solo killed a few times, and like I said, the meta wasn't really suiting him as well. Snitches, you know, I still think Snitch is the best. We'll get into mid lane in a second, and then Doom as well. But it's hard. I mean, even though they were classed as like the best team in Europe, it just shows that even if you have the best players, you know, trying to find someone to put the resources on and trying to, you know, flex around and everything like that as well can also be very, very difficult.
Yeah, I mean, in that regard, that's probably making life more difficult for SC7 in general, because I think Rix are the only team we've really seen trying to do that since the move to 80 carries. We didn't see Game Lord, but in the split, they basically played Corki or a Mage every single game, and it got really boring by the end of it, but they were really good at doing it. Queso never move off their strategy, so that we know they're never going to do it, whereas like we saw Rix play for Doom on Jinx, but we also saw them play the Mages and then play towards Snitch. We saw them play towards Random, so I think probably it's some kind of group of all of this reasoning that I would imagine it's hard to play jungle when you're like going between game, like swapping your focus and like, okay, this game we have to play for this and we have to do everything completely different. So yeah, interesting. I'm looking forward to seeing what they play in Barcelona.
Me too.
Definitely. Right. Let's move on to the mid lane next. And again, it's kind of all really the same, really. I don't know if Don's here, but Don, I think, would be fairly happy that he's in A tier now, because I think I put him in like B tier before, so he's moved up. But I think we've all kind of got our own agreements here that Snitch is the best. Maybe not like by far on some of our tier list, but I think we can all agree that Snitch is definitely. I feel like not all the time I have to mention. I feel like, you know, some games is definitely feel like he's been a little bit off, but I feel like overall, because of his like champion pool, the way he plays, and like Ryuh said as well, sometimes he doesn't. You feel like he just never makes a bad mistake. That he is above the rest of the mid laners.
Yeah, I would say that. He like Snitch was really, really close to being in like that upper tier of G for me. Because he like basically never makes mistakes. I think purely it's just because the way that he's not such a core part of Rick's that he has to carry every single game. Like we've seen Snitch have some quiet games, we've seen him have some dominant games, so it's like it's not as necessary for him to pop off. But he's like totally solid in the mid lane, just in the same way that for the most part Ruiz was. Like I felt like for the majority of the season, Ruiz basically like didn't lose lane at all. It was only like the last weekend that I think we saw a couple of matchups go against him, but Lonely Kid was like smashing everybody, so it didn't really matter. So for me, they're like right next to each other on how good they are. I think yeah.
It's funny because when I first made my tier list, I actually switched between Regna and Ruiz. I had Regna third, Don, and then Ruiz in the bottom of A. And I was considering to put him actually in the top of B tier. And this is gonna sound crazy. And I obviously changed my mind in the end. I think Ruiz, and actually I think the whole A tier, theirs, Ruiz and D and Don, have shown games where they are absolutely 1v9 and playing out of their mind, carrying the game. But we've also seen them completely turn off their brain and lose the game solely for them. I think Ruiz have had some games where he's been, I don't know what's been going on. Like I think he's just straight up lost his team the game. I think Ruiz is really odd one out on this Game Lord team. I think sometimes he looks lost. He looks terrible. His champion pool looks limited. He goes back to the Ahri whenever he feels pressured, which he does a lot. So I think he doesn't show enough. But when I have to think about it, this guy is on the winning team. I have to put him up. And again, Regna is in the same situation as Stress for me. I think Stress and Regna are fantastic players. And I'm putting them in bottom of A right now, but I'm expecting them to, maybe smash the other guys in the A tier, and it wouldn't surprise me. I think Ruiz is the most inconsistent player of these guys, and I need to see more of him if Game Lord is going to win this tournament. And why I put Veas above him is that Veas just straight up have more 1v9 games than Ruiz. I think Veas has more games where he's carrying and less games where he's inting. And Don is, I don't know, I don't see him having the same ceiling as the other two. Might be wrong, he might prove me wrong, but I think Don has not shown the same amount of, ceiling and straight up 1v9 potential, but I don't think he's been inting as much as the other guys either. So the A tier for me it could be even. I could put them all next to each other, and it would probably be better.
I think that's fair. Also, I actually like the Ahri point about Ruiz is something that we really felt in the last week, right? And I think I was probably kind of forgetting about that. You're totally right that like he felt a little bit shaken in the last few games that we saw them. So I think that's a totally fair point.
But yeah, on the other hand, we saw Veas picking Akali and going, 16-0. That was crazy.
I think Veos definitely has kind of that secondary carry potential where maybe Andreas can't really do too much, and obviously we know that Joey doesn't play like any AD carries really at all, and when he does, he hasn't really felt really comfortable on like the Vayne before, but maybe we'll see him play some other hyper carries. But I feel like when Andreas is not really performing, and we know Acolyte not really the main carry, I feel like Veos is definitely kind of their secondary carry, and if they can put him on an assassin, which we've seen, like you said, from like the Akali as well, I feel like he can definitely pop off as well. The thing about Ruiz is that even though you talk about the whole thing about going back onto Ahri, sometimes like comfort is, I guess, the best in them sort of situations where you feel like you can't really play something that maybe you're not really too comfortable on at the time. I still feel like Ruiz has done pretty good on Game Lord, but I think he's just more of a standard, more safe mid laner than the others. You see Veos playing assassins, always playing aggressive going in. Don as well, always playing aggressive going in with like Irelia. When he's not playing Irelia, he's playing these other bruisers, these aggressive bruisers in the mid lane. Whereas Ruiz kind of has this like different playstyle where he doesn't really play aggressive in the mid lane. He just plays a bit more passive, and he kind of waits for his team to go around him, or he just roams around the map. He doesn't really focus on like his lane a lot. So yeah. I
mean, I agree with you. And the mid lane right now is where you have 4 minutes of laning, and then you go to a side lane, you got to farm. And if the other ones are going to focus you, you can either pop off or die, or you're going to be just stuck in the side lane and you won't really, show much. And I agree with your point, Snitch, about the fact that Ruiz is on a like more back in a situation where he doesn't have to carry. We have to just sit there and clear waves. I just think Snitch does the same, but he makes less mistakes, he carries more, and he facilitates plays around the map. Whereas for me, Ruiz just looks like someone where it's like, please don't die while we carry the game. It's not a holding point. It's not a holding point for the game like Snitch is for Rix. Ruiz is like this guy where it's like, please don't throw the game while we carry. And I know Ruiz is good. Ruiz was fantastic last year, but he didn't show the champion pool. He didn't show that he could carry on Akali. He falls back, but on the other hand, he still makes mistakes. I mean, he still have games where he's solid, you know. So it's hard to put him lower. I feel like mid lane is such a flippy point of view right now, where Snitch is the only mid laner in Europe who is consistently good.
Yeah.
And that is why I have a full tier between him and the rest. All those players are great. They just aren't consistent.
I get that. I totally get that about consistency. And it's one of the reasons why I was struggling where to put Don as well. Because I feel like formulation got so easy to draft around because you knew they were going to pick Aurelia. And as long as you had counterpick and could pick a matchup where it was just like, well, we just shit on Aurelia for 10 minutes and then win the game because you can't actually do anything with it. I felt like I just want like formulation when we were casting them back in January and at the beginning of the year, they had like a wider playbook and they were really good at team fighting and really, really strong like that. But I feel like the Aurelia pick, although it makes sense for Don and there are matchups that it works in, I feel like it's a liability. I feel like teams figured out how to draft against it, and I feel like it just like let formulation down in the end of all things. Even though it's still a good pick, I would love to see them kind of half retire it to like, okay, it's good in this game. It's good specifically here, not just like let's first rotation Aurelia and just like say screw it.
But then again, you know, if you look at formulation, to me, they have a top laner who has a small champion pool and is not a carry player. They have a jungler who wants to go crazy, and they have an AD carry who is also not very reliable. So Aurelia makes sense in the fact that formulation has a very unique playstyle, and it makes sense in their point of view, and that is also why I'm putting Don in the same tier as others. But I would not be surprised if we are seeing Ragnar as literally the second best mid laner after Snitch after this event. I have so high hopes for Nasser as a team. But I think this mid jungle is going to be crazy, and I can't wait to see them play. But I think that the pieces around them obviously is not storing enough. But I hope so. They will pop off.
I think the whole Don situation as well is that I feel like that's why a lot of teams just focus on Don in the mid lane, because they know that UI can't really carry. They know Fekko doesn't really play carries or can't really carry too much. So as long as they focus Don in the mid lane, then formulation are basically, you know, done. Like there's not really much. There's not really much else that they can do, which is kind of a problem. It shows how good Don is as a player itself, but it also shows kind of a weakness to the formulation as well. And like I said, that matchup again. That matchup again against Unicorns of Love. I mean, we haven't spoken a lot about it, but briefly, like the bottom as well. Zaku and Nakrez. I put Nakrez as a question mark at the bottom as well because I don't really know too much about Nakrez. I think Zaku definitely has a lot to prove. I mean, we only saw like a few games of him. Obviously, he was the AD carry before. But now he's moved on to mid lane. I think we saw, what did he play? He played Twisted Fate and he played something else I can't remember. I remember him playing Twisted Fate and he looked fairly decent, but it might have been Dinah. Yeah, it might have been Dinah. But again, I think with the lane swap and just how many other good mid laners there are, obviously Necrez I don't really know too much about. I think Reckoner's pretty good, but Necrez I haven't seen really anything at all, which is why I think that we're probably going to watch, you know, a few of the Turkish games to have a look and see how these players perform. But I think in the regions that they were in as well, I think they definitely again have to come in and prove a lot as well against the best players, because like I said, NASA, Parla, Unicorns of Love. Like when you compare them three names, like the 4 European teams as well, you feel like, you know, they're probably weaker than all 4 of the European teams. But I definitely feel like there could be some situations, and I guess, you know, especially on the new patch as well, and new changes, and they, you know, these teams have had about a month now really to prepare as well, so that there could be a lot of surprises definitely in the tournament.
Are there going to be many changes to mid lane meta, do we think, for this? Because I felt like it was kind of stale towards.
I think it's going to be stale.
Yeah, I think it will kind of be. I mean, it was just like really bruisers and then a little few majors here and there, but there wasn't really that many majors.
Yeah, like one thing to wrap up mid lane a little bit, and again, I don't want to feel like I'm harping on Don, but like
that's fine.
Through the 2 years of like working with Splice and Mad Lions, like one thing that I picked up on a lot with their coaching staff is anytime you can walk into a draft and have things that are like, well, 50% of the time, like we can assume that he's going to pick this one pick. Like suddenly it gives you so many less drafts to think about. Like you're working within like this situation where you're like, well, we can reliably assume he's going to do that, and then we can just plan a set of drafts for if he doesn't.
But that is Ryu's for me. That is Ryu's for me.
With Ari, right?
Yeah.
So any coaching team with the money is going to come into matchups against game mode and say that, and against formulation and say that, and you should be prepared for both situations, right? And I think you're totally right then with that regard. Like that'll be an interesting one to see how people draft around game mode. It'll have been 2 months since we've seen them as well.
Yeah, that is the exact reason I have Vegas. Yeah, that is the exact reason I have Vegas above the others. Champion pool, simply.
I think Snitch just has a champion pool above and beyond the rest.
Yeah.
I don't think we need to talk about Snitch's champion pool, to be fair. I mean, he's just
we don't need to
mid lane
everything.
Even more. Exactly. That is very.
He'll
very
be
true.
watching this tomorrow on his stream. Like we don't need to say too much more nice about it. Nice Snitch's stream.
You already said nice stuff about him already. Right, I think we covered mid lane quite a bit. Anything else you guys want to add, or are we all good with the?
I think we good.
All good mid lane. Right. Duo lane's a fun one for me. I really like duo lane. Duo lane's very, very interesting for me. I personally, you two have put them both in S, but I personally feel like Doom has a little bit of an edge over Redemption. Now this is hard as well because obviously we haven't seen Redemption for like 2 months, so we don't actually know if he's going to play in any of like these hyper carries or anything. Well, obviously, yeah, Corky, but he hasn't really played like any of these hyper carries. And then you got obviously Joey Skaggs, which I feel like personally didn't really have the best performance at all. But again, it's more to do with facilitating his team than actually being the carry. But even when he has played the carry, like the Vayne, he hasn't looked very good as well. And then you kind of have the rest like Fekko. Cool effects I don't really know too much about. Slideland just played Galio for 2 games, so again don't know too much about him really. And then Catstay as well, again I don't know too much about. But we've all put Doom above Redemption though, which is quite an interesting one.
Yeah, I feel like Doom, if we hadn't seen those Jinx games and some of like the 80 carry games, I'd probably put it the other way around. And it's the same reason why Doom's not up in the G tier. It's like I think Doom had a couple of games that he looked really underwhelming on some of the majors, but then had some 80 carry games where he looked insanely good on Jinx. And then even the majors in the last few series we saw with the Orianna looked great, but still I felt like there were enough games where I just felt like Doom was there for the ride with Rix, that not in a bad way. I mean, you don't have to carry every single game, right? But again, Rix, I think for me, it's a difficult one for me because every player on Rix can carry, and they can have those games where they get the resources, but without being the one player that carries every single game, it's really hard to stand out that far ahead, right?
I think it's interesting because ADC role right now, obviously some people think it's changed with Riggs picking up Jinx in one of the games. I think AD carry role is still a major spot lane. It's where you pick something scaling mages. You're gonna clear your waves safely. You're gonna not make mistakes, and you're gonna be useful for the late game. You know.
Yeah.
And I think Doom makes the least mistakes straight up. I think he's caught the fewest times. He's in the right position the most times. And he's popping off when he can. I think he plays ADC. He plays a role like you're supposed to. And I think Redemption has a few more games where I think he has more in place straight up. I would maybe even put Redemption 1 tier below. But I also know Redemption that when he picks Vayne, he can 1v9 the game. Like this guy is crazy good mechanically. So I'm like, my belief that Redemption is a great player makes him just one spot below Doom. But I think with how consistent Doom has been, I think he just deserves to be in the top of the list. But at the same time, AD carry role right now is so stale, and you don't get to show much skill, and that's why these guys are the best to me. And the reasoning, the other guys are so much lower for me. And when I still talk about no skill, is that when you play a role where you don't get to showcase your ability that much, you can still look terrible if you get caught out of position. And that's something these guys have been doing a lot more. Zealand, I put him lower simply because of the region. I haven't seen enough. I think he's not as good, but he's probably going to be fine. But Fekko and Joey Skaggs have games where they just, I don't know what they're doing. Why are you here? You're dead. I don't know. Face checking brushes for no reason, and I don't know, picking weird shit. I don't know. I think they're not stable enough. Simply not straight up. I think they're great players, but they are not consistent enough. They get caught out too much, and that's why they're lower in a stale role.
I get that. I think
yeah.
both Joey and Faco have their part to play in their team fights that are very one style, right? Queso and Formulation kind of like to team fighting, just around different carries, right? I think like Faco just has to stand back and kind of empower Don and the rest of Formulation and just not get caught at the back of a fight, not get flanked. For Joey, it's a little bit more about like providing threat at times if Theos isn't doing it. But again, it's like, oh, put a black shield on Andre and let him run into the fight. And just like don't die and bind somebody.
Just play Morgana
right?
and win the game.
Yeah.
Like, so I think I totally agree with you on that. Like they're opting into that like way of playing that has less skill expression anyway, so it makes them kind of not shine in their comps.
And I think I've seen great things. I've seen Joe's Kex pop off. I've seen Faco with crazy Seraphine ultimates. These guys are good players.
Yeah,
they just need to get caught less. Like, I think yeah, I mean I think that's my reasoning. I think really these guys have great ceilings, but they also sometimes are not aware enough of the minimap and of their positioning, and that's why they get caught more, and that's why they're lower, and that's why I think I rate Doom so highly because of that ability. I don't think he's a better mechanical player. Genuinely, I don't think he's better mechanically than the other guys. I think his understanding of where to be and when is just superior, and that's why he shines in a role like this.
Yeah, Joey's a hard one because I've seen like how well Joey can perform, and again, it's kind of the same thing as what I was mentioning before with like SE7. Like Joey didn't really play. I mean, he played on a few teams before, but again, you're going from like a few, decent teams, and now going into Team Queso, which is like kind of the defending champions and everything. And again, we've seen him play a lot on Morgana, and his Morgana's been okay, but even on the AD carries as well, like Varus and Vayne, he just hasn't been doing it for me. It's kind of hard to say that as well because Joey probably flamed me for this as well.
Because you were sat in like 2 weeks worth of pre-production meetings before week 1 of the split with you and Scandal and Hells talking Joey up for every single minute that you possibly could, and like overhyping him into oblivion so that we came into week 1 thinking he was going to be this mechanical god, and he gets stuck on mages
for
6 weeks of competition.
Oh god, that's kind of sad to think about actually, but I think the transition from iPad to phone hasn't helped him as well, because I think Excandral and Hells have spoken a little bit about that before as well. But he's definitely struggled a lot more on phone as well. But look, I mean, I hope Joey does perform, and hopefully he gets his chance to play AD carries again, because I feel like he does feel a lot more comfortable on AD carries than the mages. He probably doesn't really like playing Morgana, but again, it's more facilitating his team and more getting Andre, the main carry, to get ahead and not really focusing on trying to get Joey ahead. But like I said, even when they try and put Joey on AD carries, he just hasn't looked as strong as, Doom and Redemption, in my opinion.
And another point I have to make, I think this is obviously a duo lane in a meta where it's extremely roam-oriented for support players. I still think Faco is a good example for me. I think I'm going to throw him under the bus now, but Sour is probably, in my opinion, the worst laning support right now. Faco has a support in Sour. I think he's terrible on lane, but for some reason finds insane picks around the map and roams a lot and does good things. And so I think, some of these players have worse conditions also to look good. For example, Snailland, he's playing with Grizzly Q, who has insane synergy with Phaeton, and those guys are just running around carrying the game for them. So he doesn't get to shine. We've even seen him picking Galio with the Senna, so Grizzly Q can pop off. I think Grizzly Q is fantastic of a player, but that is why some of these guys are also unable to show more, and that is why also Doom and Redemption is probably not able to show more, because their supports are probably not with them most of the time, and these champions are not built to 1v1. So I think if the meta changes and we have to see these guys in a different perspective, we have to have support staying more in the lane. And I don't know. Maybe with Hullbreaker we'll see supports sticking to their bot laners more.
I love that. I love
setting up the segue.
For the next one, setting up perfectly for support. But to be fair, I love Feco though, because Feco plays so many unique champions and so many cool picks. I don't know.
FMG.
It's just so fun to watch. Yeah, it's just so. I mean, it's so fun to watch though. I mean, I still remember me and Stress casting Purge, and he was bringing out like Galio Duo Lane and things like that as well, playing like Zao with Thresh as well. So I mean, I think Formulation are definitely a team that definitely can have a few things up their sleeve as well, and a few surprises, because Fecker brought out Seraphine, he brought out Misfortune. For the first time, I think he was one that brought out Brand as well. So he definitely has some interesting picks that he can maybe pop off on, which might give them a little bit of an advantage. But let's go on to the supports, and I think there's kind of I would say no surprise really with the supports.
Wait, we forgot one thing. We forgot a thing. We didn't even speak about Cool FX and Katze.
Oh yeah, true. We didn't talk about them too. I mean, personally, I don't really know too much about them too. That's why they're in the question mark here, and you're kind of the same as well.
Okay,
I mean,
I have an opinion.
What do you think about
Katze?
Okay, go on.
I think Cool FX looked insanely on his team. He was on the 3rd place team or 4th place in the Turkish region, and he got picked up by NASR, who won the thing. They switched out Mer, who was the previous ADC, and they picked up Cool FX instead, who got 3rd place with his team in the last chance qualifier. And I think Cool FX looked great. I think he looked crazy good and potentially the best ADC in the Turkish region. I think he can compete with other guys. I think he's literally like Joey Skaggs 2.0. This guy who wants to carry but is stuck in a role where he can't really. And I'm the reason I put him in question marks here is that he has never played with this team before. We have never seen a competitive match with him on this team because he's just a new player. I think he's great. I'm excited to see how he does. And I think Katze is the worst player in the tournament.
I love that you give this whole context.
You're so blunt.
Like him picking up one player and then he's just like, and the last thing I want to do is just...
Yeah, you're like Cool FX, all this hype up and all this everything, and Katze, like, yeah, whatever.
It's like, sorry, go to supports. Like,
yeah, that's it. Roll the tape, roll the tape.
Go next.
Go next. FF, go next. Right, let's go on to support. I think there's no surprise, really, with supports with kind of all of us, really. Heste, just by far the best support, I think, from all of us as well. Clue very close behind as well. A few little bit of differences between kind of the rest of the tier list, but I guess we can briefly talk about Heste. I mean, Heste this guy is an absolute animal, isn't he?
Yeah, this is like the easiest G for me to put down outside of Andre. Andre, I don't believe the Team Queso are going to win the tournament, but if they are going to win, it's going to be through him. Whereas like Game Lord absolutely have a chance to win this tournament and absolutely are one of the favorites. And for me, almost everything starts and ends with Heste. Like his Rakan is insane. His engages, he's always just everywhere he needs to be. And like we've talked a lot about players being out of position. I feel like Heste is a player that I can't even think of moments where I've thought, wow, Heste got caught out. Damn, that's a big deal right now. I feel like his positioning and where he needs to be is like best. And like I probably would have put more room between Heste and the rest of the supports that are in attendance, because I actually don't think all of the best supports are at Barcelona. I think this is probably gonna hurt a little when I say that. I think like Flower.
What about the other guy from?
You know what?
I was crazy.
I was actually gonna stroke your ego and say, when you came in week 1, I remember having a meeting being like, why do they even have another support? Like, Ryuh looks great. So, if we'd have seen more games from you, maybe I'd be saying that too. But I'd have to put you in question mark.
I mean, I will also have to say, from these supports, I think Heste is probably also better than me. I will give him that. Yeah.
That's so gracious.
Heste's
wow.
better than me. Yeah.
I think everyone probably would have predicted that one, but oh god.
No, I one of the reasons Heste is so good is also emphasis on my jungle tier list. His synergy with Zefta is out of this world. And even Lonely Kid. These guys play around Lonely Kid a lot. And now that we have all the tier lists, I mean everyone is here. I think I'm most surprised, I'm most curious to see how Hullbreaker is gonna change the meta. Because Hullbreaker wants your solo carry player to play alone and not be interrupted by other players, And Lonely Kid is a 1v9 player who is winning these games because of Heste and Zefta camping his lane and getting insane leads. That is why they win games. And if Hullbreaker changes this, well, how is Game World gonna play the game then? If they want Lonely Kid with the Hullbreaker 1v9 in the game taking over the top lane, what is Zefta and Heste gonna do? So yes, they're the best players, and they are crazy good. Those guys' synergy is just out of this world. The best jungle support duo we've seen in Europe ever. That's how good they are. But how is the Hullbreaker meta gonna change for them? That is so exciting for me to see.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, just underneath as well, we all put Clue underneath as well. I think for me, Clue he's not really a standout player, I feel like, for Riggs, but I feel like he's just very, very solid and he could play a lot of champions. Like, I feel like Clue's champion pool is probably... Actually, I can't say that. I can't say Clue Champions pool is bigger than Heste, because Heste had 5 bans put towards him, multiple games, and he still popped off with Nami, I remember, in one game as well. So I'm going to backtrack everything that I just said about Clue having a bigger champion pool, but I still feel like Clue has a pretty big champion pool anyway, and he's not a standout player, but I feel like he's just very, very solid. That's a funny thing to mention about Heste as well, is that you cannot ban out this guy at all. No. Like, you ban 5 champions, there's in multiple games. He picks up a Nami, and we're thinking, I don't remember who was casting. It might have been me and you.
Yeah, I was in that game. Yeah. It was like the last game of finals, wasn't it?
Yeah, and then he was like
Nami and like double bubbled everybody.
Exactly, and he was landing all these bubbles. We were like, wow, shit, this guy doesn't only play Rakan and Galio really well, he can also play Enchanters really well as well. And it just blows your mind that even when 5 champions are banned towards him. But yeah, Clue, not really a standout player, but I feel like him personally is very, very solid. And then below that, I agree with what you said as well. Ryuh is like Grizzly Q is very, very good. I feel like he's a very, very solid support. I've played with him and against him before as well in solo queue, and he's insanely good. And I feel like his Senna as well, if he can get his hands on the Senna, if they could play the Senna Galio lane, I feel like that was really, really strong. And that was one of the main reasons why they beat talented ones. But obviously, that's kind of really the only time we saw them. And then Methanol, we've seen little bits of glimpses here and there, but not really, maybe as good as the rest.
You could also say you've seen a little bit of Alistar here and there, and then otherwise not so good. I think Methanol is again, his Alistar is crazy good. This guy is maybe the best support if he plays Alistar, but he doesn't play Alistar, so he's stuck on random picks and giving shields to Andrew said, so he's gonna carry the game. I think it's Methanol was this crazy aggressive support when he came into the scene, where he just wanted to fight, pick Thresh, pick Alistar, roam, take over the game, and he's not really been doing that ever since. So I'm still putting him in A because I think he's great. I think he makes the least amount of laning mistakes. I think he might even be a better laner than Clue, and I don't want to say Heste, but Heste is never on the lane, so I don't care. But for me, Grizzly Q and Methanol have shown glimpses of them being amazing, but it's still so far away from Clue and Heste, who's the top 2 teams. And I want to mention, I think, as I said also before the final game, Clue has to step up to match Heste. He hasn't shown that yet, but he's shown us that in the past. So I'm giving him the benefit of the doubt, but I think his laning has been very poor, and I think he's not being able to match Heste enough. But every time we see him against other teams, he does great, So he's been exposed a lot by Heste. Maybe there should be even more space between them, but obviously he's still the best, of the rest. So
I'm glad you commented on that, because it was something that when I was thinking about this tier list specifically, I had the gut feeling in my brain where I was just like, I swear they walked into lane and got blasted 2v2 in their series, but I just didn't have it there like solid enough to be like, yeah, okay, Clue's laning wasn't great against Hester, so I'm glad to hear that like kind of is the right vibe. I think Clue is also on the downside of like not having those insane engages that Heste does. Like every time Heste is on Rakan or an engage support, I'm like, what the hell's he gonna do? Like, how is he gonna win this fight? How's he gonna carry the game from here? Whereas with Clue, I'm always like, okay, he's gonna be on something like Thresh, he's gonna land some people out, it's gonna be fine, they'll play safe while the rest of the team are winning. So,
but that's also like Clue has a different role, Like I feel like this Riggs team is kind of like a very balanced team that's not really doing too much, but just playing the game slowly and trying to find the right times to engage, and like more safe team because they trust their teammates. We can win the game if nothing happens, and that is why it's harder to stand out on this team, and that is why Snitch is a G tier player from a passive team, because he does this so well, and Clue does as well, Doom does as well, but yeah, again. I think if we have to go to the other players, I think Sour, for me, is a mid laner stuck in a support role. I think maybe even like this guy is trying to do so many things at the wrong times, but individually is so good that it sometimes works.
Mm-hmm.
I
agree.
I feel like he's the main reasoning that FMG sometimes looks terrible, because he's just randomly starting a fight for no reasoning, and his team is gonna try to help him, and then they all die. But at the same time, sometimes he starts a crazy fight and he just 1v9s the game because he's caught out someone randomly without vision. I don't know, like this guy has some of the highest highs, I mean below Hester, but still some of the lowest lows. And I think his laning is poor. His roaming is hit and miss, but when it hits, it's so sexy. So I don't know where to put it. I still think he's better than the other ones, but mechanically speaking, he might maybe be the best support on this list, but this role doesn't fit him, in my opinion. He was a great mid laner and a much worse support.
Yeah, I still remember him playing mid lane as well. I still remember the Z1 versus 3 outplay that he did in one of the tournaments as well. And that's the thing with me and Zara, like me putting Zara in B tier as well, is like I feel like his roaming was actually pretty decent as well for formulation, like especially on Galio as well. I felt like he played pretty decent on Galio, and like you said, I think his mechanics are up there, but I feel like he just sometimes he doesn't know what to do in the role because he's so used to being mid laner. That's kind of expected. I mean, I think Doom's a very rare occasion where he could just go from jungle to bot lane wherever he wants to and still look like an absolute god. I think he's a very rare breed, Doom. Yeah, someone like Zawa, that he's gone from mid lane, he's gone from being a really, really solid mid laner to now go into support as well. It's a bit of a big difference as well, especially because how the support meta was. It was to do with a lot of roaming, to do with a lot of camping the Baron laners, getting them ahead. And like you said, sometimes you felt like he was in the wrong places sometimes. But again, his mechanics are really, really good. And the other two as well, I don't really know too much about. Guiz and Babane. Babane, is it? Again, they're both from Turkey. Again, I'll probably have to watch more games from them as well. Yeah. But again, coming in from a kind of a lesser known, not lesser known region, but from a weaker region overall, I feel like everyone can agree with that. And then playing against weaker opponents is going to be interesting how they come up against the likes of, Heste and Clue. I don't think they have a single chance in hell against Heste and Clue, but, it's LAN at the end of the day. And we've seen before, even from Horizon Cup, that anything can happen at LAN, with how well Unicorns Love played there.
And I think Baban is actually really, really good in some ways. I think, again, he plays with Swest, who I think is crazy good. He plays well around him, but he's not the one shines. I think I put him so close to the other guys because I think these guys are playing good. They're smashing the guys in their own region. Why shouldn't they be good players, Yeah. And I think Gaius has also looked pretty good. And considering he has the worst player in the tournament laning with him, I think this guy is deserves more praise. I'm sorry, I'm brutal here, but I'm just giving my straight opinion. I think Gaius looks good, even though he has worse pieces around him. So I think it's gonna be fine. I think we're gonna see a lot of supports being decent, but it still, depends on their junglers how they perform, and Hester and Clue's probably gonna smack them all anyways.
Yep. I think we can all agree with that. Anything else with support, or do we move on to the teams? Anyone else?
I think we're good. We can move to teams, and I'll have my rant.
Oh, here we go. This is where the everything gets flipped around and everything goes a bit. I guess a bit all over the place. Oh my god, where do we really start?
I want to start with Unicorns of Love. I want to start with this team. I love Unicorns of Love as an organization. I've casted them from their entire history's existence. I cast literally some of their first competitive League of Legends games. So what I'm about to say gives me absolutely no pleasure. But the Unicorns of Love that I watched beat Talented Ones looked so disjointed on a macro level that their only option was to group around an objective as 5, not do the objective, and just hope they could out team fight their opponents and then coin flip doing it and see if they get the objective. It worked because they built a full team fight composition that I just felt like I was seeing literally nothing. There was no dragon control or herald control without a 5v5 fight ahead of it. No wave setup, no side lane management in any way. And it was just okay, we're past 4 minutes, let's just group and 5v5 against each other forever. So I just think they're going to get out macroed by every single team at this event, even from the little that I've seen out of NASA and Parla in general.
I agree with you. Wait, can you hear me?
Yeah, of
Oh,
course,
it
yeah.
blacked out for me. Whatever.
That's all good.
For me, I think when I saw this team, that is why you can see I put all of the laners in the worst. Obviously, not Katze, but like Snaland, Q, and Coldstar are all the worst laners in my opinion compared to the other guys. Maybe they're good players, but they're the worst laners. And Fatson and Grizzly Q, I have them really high. I think this team is correct. You know, their lane management is terrible. Their wave management is terrible. Their carries are not putting up enough damage. But Grizzly Q and Fatson is making this work somehow. I think they are literally standing out, dragging this team over the finish line.
Fair.
And if we're watching a tournament where we have, let's say, people being nervous, players being nervous, not really pushing the leads on lane, I think these guys are maybe not going to be exposed because of nerves. And then Fatson and Stress is on an even playing ground and can maybe take over the game by their macro. So yes, I think Unicorns of Love have the worst laners in the game, but I think Fatson and Stress are really, really good. And I think they can edge it over Parla. I still think they have some way to go for the rest of the teams, but I think Unicorns of Love is this black horse where they have terrible laners but insane jungle support duo. So it's going to be exciting to see how it's going to, turn out.
That totally makes sense though. Like because you expect like I would expect jungle and support to have that kind of positioning about knowing, okay, well, we need to contest objectives, and then if the laners just aren't in control of their own lane, they're like, well, I guess we just group then. And
yep, exactly.
Just literally move around the map as five because nobody has the confidence. Yeah.
I think, I think we can all kind of agree that there's kind of a gap between like maybe Unicorns of Love and Parla and kind of the rest of them. I mean, maybe like Ryuh put like Unicorns of Love a bit closer to like NASA and Formulation, and I think I do agree that, I mean, we've only really seen Senna from Grizzly Q, but I feel like he prefers to be on the more of this carry role as a support. With Schneidland there, and again, as you said, Faton as well. As you move up as well, we've all put Formulation above NASA, and then we've put Team Queso pretty much the same, and then at the top, me and Stress have gone with Rex, and Ryu's gone with Game Lord. So,
who won the finals?
Yeah.
No, that's the okay.
Who really wasn't in finals?
That is true.
Who was one game away from some other team? What was that? The team that was like basically should have won that game. And
Viv. Oh yeah. I mean, I think Viv had that crazy good coach. I think.
Yeah. And then coach couldn't control it in the end of that last game where they basically had the game won. And yeah. Oh, sorry, I won't go too hard.
No, but I think WREC and Game Lord are the two best teams straight up.
Yeah.
I think we have, from my point of view, we have a tier called G tier, which is teams that play Wild Rift. We have S tier. We have teams that play Monkey style, but they are good players. And then we have Burger Flippers from A and below. And that's how I see it. I think Team Queso is the best flipping team, so that the Monkeys, the other guys are the Burger Flippers, and WREC and Game Lord up in here saying, hey, we play Wild Rift. How are you doing, guys? Playing a different game.
Oh God. You know what? If we don't get a Game Lord versus WREC's final, I will be very sad. I'll be very sad.
I think there's a world. Wait, which group Queso are in? Queso are in WREC's group, right?
Yeah, Queso are WREC. You know what? Group A is actually hella stacked, by the way. Because you got WREC, Queso, and NASA.
I think there's a world where, like, whether it's via a tie or like somehow Queso just edge out their series, and then it ends up WREC's Game Lord in the semifinals. I don't think that's likely to happen. I am expecting a WREC's Game Lord finals, but like I can see a world where Andre just decides to like shit on everybody for a best of 3 series and like manages to get through and sneaks past by like 1 extra game victory, if that makes sense.
But I'm also I can see a world where Nasra just lose every single game, you know. And that's why I put them lower, because I think genuinely Swest and Regner are crazy good players. But straight up, like, what are they gonna do? They have Team Queso and WREC in their group.
Yeah.
You can be good, but you cannot be the best. That's fair. It's fair. You can be great, But if you're playing against someone better, you're gonna lose, and you're still a good player, you're still a good team, and they just have the worst, seeding. I think they should just not have won Turkey, I guess.
Yeah, NASA got put in a really, really tough spot. Because for people who don't know, the groups are RICS, where we go, Team Queso. I can't type for some reason.
Team.
NASA.
Team TQ, let's go.
Team TQ. Then you have Game Lords.
FMG / Unicorns of Love.
Yeah, FMG. FMG.
And then Parla.
Because I think the seeding is fair, even though it's very, very harsh on
NASA.
On NASA. And I'm saying really, really harsh on NASA, because if you think, they got Team Queso and RICS in their group, and even though NASA's like the first seed coming out of Turkey, and I've seen this team perform really well as well, and I just don't see NASA getting out of their group. I really, really don't. It's going to be so hard for them. They have to pull up some sort of upset or something like that, because you only play one best of 3 against each one. So I mean, there could be a possibility that all teams go one. Wait, is that a possibility where all teams go 1-1? That possibility?
Yeah, it is. If everybody wins their best of 3, then
it is.
Goes,
yeah.
I don't know the actual rules that we're using,
Yeah,
but what would make sense is you go to then match score, I would imagine. And then if that's completely tied, then it likely goes to a tiebreaker. What I would say is, like, NASA, I think, not only have the toughest competition, but they also have the complete opposite play styles to play against, right? You've got to play against Team Queso, where you're like, okay, how do we ban Andre out? Well, you can't, because he's played games with 8 jungle bans and still finds shit. And then you're playing against RICS, where you're like, we don't know who their carry is. So how, other than playing your game really solidly, which I think we've already kind of agreed on, that we don't think NASA as strong as these two teams, like, now you've got like these 2 different play styles to play against. So I feel like it's like the poison chalice has been given over on this group. If they make it out, like, they should be G rank, by far.
I can see a world where NASA beats Team Queso, but I never see a world where NASA can beat RICS. I think RICS is too solid for NASA to expose them, but I think Team Queso is a really flippy team, and NASA flips as well, and NASA wants to flip around that jungler, and TQ wants to flip around that jungler. And I think Stress is great, so I think he can match them. I think if NASA wins, is pure mid jungle just dominating the game, but they want to play the game the same way. So I see a world where TQ flips early game, it doesn't work out, and Stress simply just takes over the game, But for that to happen, it's gonna be difficult with the pieces around him, Acolyte being so stable, hard to expose. Veas, good luck beating him mechanically, and yeah. Methanol and Josex is like solid bot lane, so
fair. I think then, looking at the other group, I think it's easy Game Lord first. I think they're too good. Then I'm predicting Formulation make it past Unicorns. I think they both are a team fighting team. I think Formulation just understand how to play the map better than Unicorns do, and it's like, what's that old saying about like teaching a kid piano? All you got to do is be one lesson ahead, right? Is you just you don't need to be the best Wild Rift team in the world, but if you're just a little bit better than the others, it's like macro while team fighting. And then I think Formulation, I would say they beat Parla, but I'm still halfway through watching Parla's games, so
I think Parla would be stomped by FMG, but I think FMG is probably also gonna go through Unicorns of Love matchup. I think if Unicorns of Love is to win, this is where the fun part is, because I think if you want to beat Unicorns of Love, just expose the top laner. If you want to beat FMG, just expose the top laner. And if those guys are gonna be sitting there throwing kicks in each other's face, then we're gonna have an interesting battle around the map. So I think FMG is the better team, but I think if Unicorns of Love is gonna win, it's gonna be from Fatten and Grizzly Q outpacing Kimao and Sawa, which I think is legitimate. Is probably gonna happen, but as you can see in my rankings, those teams are so close.
Yeah.
So it's gonna be, I don't know. Unicorns of Love for me is a better team than their individual parts, but FMG is for me the opposite.
So these could potentially be our semi-finals from like what we think could be the thing, which I think makes it really, really spicy.
But if those are the semi-finals, I think that's Rick's Game Lord making it through.
Yeah, I think it.
Like,
But then you know what makes it even more interesting is that we're gonna get formulation against Team Queso because the third place
last
team
spot.
obviously goes to Icons, which I think is even more interesting, really, than the
Mhm.
Riggs versus Game Lord matchup, which is gonna be really spicy. But yeah, I mean,
Well, I mean, now that plays into how important the Rix Game Lord matchup is as well. So we to put this out there, we don't know exactly, at least that I'm aware of, the format of icons and how anything like that is going to draft. But historically, you always want that number 1 seed because you want to dodge like every single other top tier team, right? So for Rix and Game Lord, one of them is going to be given that poison chalice for icons, right? Where your tier 2 seed drafted into a tier 1 seed from like major regions that
oh yeah,
you're
if
just
it's
gonna crush
if it's
these.
similar to like other Riot games, like Worlds, for
Yeah,
example,
I
yeah,
imagine it will be. I imagine it will be.
I'll be very surprised. Yeah, but yeah, it's. I don't know. I think I think the predictions are going to be tough, and I mean it starts off really crazy as well with the formulation versus Unicorns of Love, and then you go straight into the first group where they all play best of 3 against each other, and then the winners go through to the semi-finals. But I think that's pretty much everything. I think we covered everything. We kind of gave our own like little predictions and everything at the end as well. Is there anything else you two want to say?
I just want to say to all the people that's gonna watch the tournament, don't be too hard on Nessa if they go 0-4 or 0 whatever. I think there's such a 0-2. Yeah, it's only it's actually only one round robin. I think just enjoy good players watching League of Legends, playing League of Legends, and I just think Nessa is just, I don't know, unlucky. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. I think because it's because just EU teams are just so much stronger.
Yeah.
I think that's what it is, because I think these seedings and these groups make sense, because like you got Game Lord EU first, which makes sense, which means that Turkish second seed goes in that group, and then NASA first seed goes into Rix's second seed with EU, and then because historically EU has done better than Turkey. That means that Game Lord get the play-ins because they're EU's first seed, so they get the lower seed between Team Queso and Formulation, which means that goes in that group, which means Team Queso goes into that group. So that's the way that I think they did it anyway, and I think it makes sense. But as you said, it's really hard on NASA because even though they got Turkish first seed, like imagine if them two were swapped. Imagine if NASA got second seed. And they were like playing up against like either Formulation or Unicorns of Love.
Yes.
I think that would be even more spicy. Yeah, that definitely would be more spicy. But it's going to be very hard for them. But I mean, I think as you said before, Ryuh, it's a LAN environment. It's completely different from playing at home. You don't know if these players are going to be very comfortable. There's going to be a bunch of lights around them and everything like that as well. And I feel. I mean, I've never really played a LAN environment, but I think a lot of people mention that a LAN environment is just so much different.
Generally, you see players slow down from online play. Generally, take a few less risks, and also you have to factor in fatigue. Like this is one of these things where these teams are going to have to be ready, and I expect Game Lord and Rix to be. But I just double checked the website. The format is announced. Like the finals is a best of 7. So you've got to be ready on that finals day to play 7 games if you're in that series, 5 games if you're in the series before. Broadcast team got to be ready to cast up to 12 games in a day. Let's do it. Let's go 7 games of Rick's Game Lord back to back to back to back.
I mean, or it could just be 4-0. Who knows?
No.
I hope that in the end of this, Fatson and Grizzly Q moves to EU, and Svest and Regner moves to EU, and we're gonna see some stacked teams next season.